Most school leaders want to change the system for the better, but too few are willing to ask difficult or uncomfortable questions, such as what if the best model for liberatory education didn't come from Ivy League think tanks, but from Black teachers working in the Jim Crow era schools? That's the powerful lens that Dr. Karida L. Brown and myself talk about in today's podcast. She's not just an NAACP Image Award winning author, she's a professor, public intellectual, and one of the most important voices pushing us to rethink how education either uplifts or erases Black minds. In today's conversation, we explore what it means to reclaim the classroom as a site of radical care, cultural power, and unapologetic excellence. We talk about why Black schools under segregation often had higher expectations than many integrated ones, the hidden curriculum today's students are still navigating, and how school leaders can build ecosystems of belonging that don't just include, they affirm. This episode will challenge how you think, what you think, and everything you think you know about school, equity, and leadership. I'm Daniel Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for innovative school leaders who want to do school different, even within traditional settings, so that you create a campus experience worth showing up for. Thanks to Ruckus makers just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of nearly 4 million podcasts worldwide. Like I said, my guest today is Dr. Karida L. Brown, professor at Emory, author of The Battle for the Black Mind, and a brilliant force in education. So once again, thanks for listening, and we'll be right back after a few short messages from our show sponsors. Still scrambling for supplies like it's 1999? ODP Business Solutions streamlines everything from pencils to projectors so you can focus on what matters, making an impact. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Today's episode of Better Leaders, Better Schools is brought to you by Play Piper. The innovators of tomorrow are sitting in classrooms today, but only if we give them the right tools. Piper's STEM kits connect kids' love of gaming with real-world coding and engineering, turning curiosity into career-ready skills. Keep your students engaged and inspired. Learn more at playpiper.com. That's playpiper.com. IXL is a go-to support for classroom teachers because its adaptive platform makes differentiated instruction easy. See for yourself and get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. Hey there, Ruckus Maker, Danny here, and I am joined by Dr. Karida Brown, who's here to discuss her book, Battle for the Black Mind. And we're so excited to dig into that. So, Dr. Brown, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Danny.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we start with, talking about your parents growing up in the Jim Crow South and, what it was like for them to go, quote unquote, to colored schools?
For sure. Yeah. My parents, they grew up in a Jim Crow community in Eastern Kentucky, an old
Mm.
coal mining town called Lynch, Kentucky. And what that meant for them is that my parents grew up in a separate and unequal environment. This was dictated by the state, as we know. And
Mhm.
it's easy to think about separate and unequal as like just physical separation with the
Mhm.
Black community over here and the white community over there. But no, these are systems that were designed to be inferior from a structural perspective, financially, resources, and the quality of, what they were supposed to get. So what this meant for my parents' education is that, they attended these Jim Crow schools. My parents went to the Lynch Colored Public School. And I've always been fascinated by that. As a person who didn't grow up in that context, I've always really wanted to understand What did that mean? And how did Black Americans, like my parents and their whole generation, survive and thrive in spite of those systems? Because I watched them just go to the moon, that whole generation.
Yeah, right. And I think it was in our pre-chat, you were talking about how even though they were in these separate and unequal schools, the teachers still were able to propel students into the future. And yeah, what would you like to add on to that?
Well, that's the most fascinating thing that I, through my research and just, talking to my elders, that I've discovered is that in spite of these systems, Black teachers, parents, and students formed their own form of pedagogy to make sure that Black minds were nonetheless nourished, that they
Mhm.
received an education that equipped them not only to be able to do well in in their current circumstances, but their teachers were preparing them to compete in an integrated society. So
Mm.
they had all Black teachers who lived in their community, who knew their parents, who cared about them at the individual level. So I'll give you an example, Danny. My mom to this day, she can tell you
Mm.
about, she can still name all of her teachers from K
Mm.
through 12 and describe down in like these beautiful details, kind of like what Miss Sweat's voice sounded like, her intonation, how they dressed, how the teachers made them feel, who was the scariest. I
Mm.
name all of my teachers, but they really left an imprint on their kids' lives, these Black teachers. And my parents benefited greatly from that. They loved their school experience. And I think that's because the philosophy was to teach the whole child, not
Mm.
just reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's important too. But they got an education that was founded on like character development, compassion for others, and they knew that they were a part of a community. So those were things that were cultivated in them in their schools, and their teachers made sure of that.
Yeah, well, I'm interested, like, what do you think it was about him that made such a great impression, and like the juxtaposition where you're saying, like, you can't name all your teachers, right, and their voices and all the imprint that they had on your life, but that's it's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's a love gap that
Mm.
we experience today. My parents, they are convinced that their teachers fundamentally love them.
Mhm.
That wouldn't be an outrageous statement. I don't know if they heard those words, but they definitely felt that
Felt it.
way.
Yeah.
And when I say love, I'm not talking some like, pie in
Mhm.
the sky or hugs and kisses all the time, but they understood that even when the teachers were hard on them, that it was
Mhm.
because they had standards for them. I recall I've done some oral histories with some of the elders who graduated with my parents, and there was a man named PG Peoples. He said, "They knew that we could do it. So
Mhm.
therefore, they never let us show up as less than what they knew we could be." So there was this expectation that they come into their full selves. You be your best self, even if you're not feeling that way that day or acting that way that day. That instilled a sense of pride, dignity, and also responsibility in those students. So in the learning context, you had to show up for your lessons and for your books, but you also had to show up as a citizen, as a part of a community. So
Yeah.
those are just some of the ways in which, like, I think they got a bit of a different education than what would be standard or customary today.
Well, what I'm hearing, the kids had a very specific feeling of being cared for and held in high regard, and they were challenged to make contributions, right? Like
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to yeah.
And I mean, I don't at all want to diminish the terror and the harshness of Jim Crow. This was
Mm.
a violent system
Mhm.
of racial
Mm.
segregation and oppression and persecution.
Mhm.
So when I say like these standards and high expectations and all of that, the teachers were indexing off of that system also,
Mhm.
understanding that. There's a world out there that's designed to make you, little Black child, feel less than, to make you feel like you don't belong in these United States, to make you feel like you're not worthy of or meritorious of the same opportunities as your white peers. So the teachers, I think they overemphasized that love, overemphasized that, cheerleader spirit of you can do it. They knew that they had to compensate for what the system designed to take away from them.
Right. Yeah, it was hostile toward those kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you're at an institution, right, working as a professor where, your elders, right, and the parents and that kind of thing, like they couldn't even apply to that school. How does that like? I'm just curious what that experience is like for you and lands for you,
Oh
because
my
here you
God.
are educating future generations and just a generation or two back, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
no
it's
one looked
it's
like you on campus, right?
it's wild to this day. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
10 years in on my journey as a university professor, and I still sometimes can't believe that, that I'm here and I get to have the honor of doing what I do largely because of that. When I think about my parents who are still alive today, okay? Thank God. So this history isn't that long ago. So in just one generation, I was able to earn my PhD and become a professor, like you said, at these institutions that my parents would not have even been able to apply. Well, I've been a professor at UCLA and Emory University, both very elite institutions, predominantly white institutions. And that just reminds me of how education is the great equalizer. Okay. It is your best bet for anybody in this country to rise up in your social or economic status, right?
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah.
elevator that can take us wherever we want to go. And just by giving this country instituting some level of structural equality, look at the outcome. I mean, I'm the proof in the pudding for that. So I carry that with me into the classroom with my students. I don't take for granted when I look at my classroom and it is so diverse, so multi-ethnic, multiracial, also
Yeah.
many, many international students. I remind my students not to take this opportunity to learn together for granted
Yeah, right.
because this is something that's relatively new in this country.
Well, I want to shift us toward like maybe, yeah, different mindsets and different things that the ruckus maker watching or listening, can do, and how to approach, the work. And so, one of the questions I have for you is, what would it look like if schools were designed around the lived experiences of Black students instead of standardized compliance?
Then we could be whole. Then we
Was What's that mean to you?
That means that we then would be able to calm our central nervous systems down enough to be able to be present in a learning environment, to be able to be cultivated, because that's what schools do. If you think about, I think about schools more like a farm instead of a hunt. When you're hunting,
Okay.
you're going for an outcome. You want the kill because you got to
Mm,
eat what you kill, right?
mhm.
And there's a instant gratification there. I think about school differently. I think about it like an ecosystem, like a garden, like a field where students, will bear fruit at different times, but you're cultivating a set of sensibilities in them. When you ask me that question about Black kids and their education, so often, with that teach to the test, that that's a hunting model. That's looking at one outcome at one snapshot in time and not attending to what you're cultivating in the whole child. Understanding what Black kids especially go through, especially in the public school system in this country, with being 4 times more likely to be expelled or disciplined in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
classroom, with all of the inequity that they face in terms of discipline, sense of belonging, treatment, access, funding, resources. If we were to take a holistic view and think about how our communities could create that ecosystem of care for our kids so that school could be a place where all of the dimensions of our humanity could be attended to,
Mhm.
I think that's step one in us getting back to our values, what we say we want to live up to in this country.
Right. And kind of teasing on that idea more, there is a pressure from the system, like to sort of, well, it depends on the system, but a lot of systems are designed for the hunting model, right?
Yeah.
We want outcomes, we want achievement, we want these things quickly too. You have no time to make change. So it's completely unrealistic in my opinion. But so there's a tension, and what I'm hearing is like this need to honor the experience, empathy is here, honoring identity, right? And centering that and really prioritizing that before getting to achievement. And yet, right, like those principles are held to account for that achievement too. So talk to us about that tension, right? I know we can do both, right?
We
And
can
I
do
know we
both.
can. Yeah.
We can do both. I mean, I'll use myself as an example.
All
I
right.
was not always a great student. Not at every
Mm.
point in my career. I mean, I've been in school half my life, okay?
Yeah. You're a
Not
pro at it
all
at this point.
I'm a pro at it, but not every step of the way was I always showing up as the best student, the most prepared, getting the best grades. So by today's measures in that hunting model, perhaps I might not have gotten into a PhD program. Perhaps I
Mm,
would have been written off as not having the chops to really come into a high level intellectual field. And we know that that's not true. However, I benefited from this more holistic model. I'm a personal, a testament to what that can look like of having a
mm,
holistic, caring, learning environment that gives you time to grow into all of the different aspects of yourself. Some of us get it right quickly in some areas, and in other areas we're later bloomers, and that needs to be accounted for while having standards. So we're not
mm,
taking standards off the table. However, the way that we think about measures of success, the way that we think about evaluating a student's progress, their engagement, their assessing their capabilities and their needs. I think we need to slow down, Danny. It's not a sprint at all times. And I think from what I've seen as a professor on the other side, okay, even with my high achieving students who have kind of just worn that as their identity their whole lives, done everything right the whole way through,
yeah.
there's a point where they burn out.
Mhm.
They wonder, am I doing this because I want to and because this is what I want to pursue? Or am I on a hamster wheel just doing what I think I'm supposed to do, what the system or what my parents or what, a profession has told me I need to do? And there's a moment of reckoning I see with those students as well, which are all indications to me that it's okay to slow down sometimes. It's okay to make space for wonder in the educational journey. It's
Yeah.
okay to make space for the I don't knows, to try something that maybe won't be your forever thing, but it's good to have some experience and to not always be the best at everything that you take a shot at. School is the perfect place to allow for those things to happen as a test ground for what the real world is like when we have to do this adulting thing.
What your response there has me wondering about and resonating with is like, sometimes, well, a lot of times we're sort of measuring assessment, achievement on the right answer. And how could we redefine some of that, the stuff that's within our power to assess and evaluate wonder, curiosity, asking the right question. Because really, like often very highly successful people I meet, including
Mhm.
yourself and like the work you do, you're out there and you're asking the right questions to get the answers, and but here in school, like in traditional, like legacy models, we're teaching like you need the answer. It's not really actually about the question, which it's a wild disconnect, when you think about it.
It's super wild because the scientific method is set up for failure. The way that
Mhm.
we get to the right answer is by, like you say, asking a lot of questions. That's critical inquiry. But it's also, you're going to try probably 10, 50, 100 times and fail and a bunch of times before you get to the right answer. That is,
Mm.
in fact, the scientific method of how we come to know what we know. Why we don't apply that to the way we learn in our school environments, I can't tell you that. It just racks my brain. The idea that kids are supposed to just get it right the first time on everything, and that we're going to test and measure, the hell out of these kids to make those assessments, it just doesn't hold anywhere else in the real world. It doesn't.
Right. Well, I think here's a good spot to take a quick break to get a message in from our sponsors. And when we come back, Karida, I'd love to talk about invisible messages that schools
Mm.
send. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Let's talk about what keeps ruckus makers up at night. Creating engaging learning spaces while juggling budgets, safety protocols, and those endless supply lists. Here's the game changer. ODP Business Solutions helps you tackle it all. We're not just another vendor, we're your strategic partner in transformation. Want to turn a tired computer lab into a STEAM innovation center? We'll help design it. Need to keep 8 schools stocked and spotless? We've got sustainable solutions that scale. Looking to upgrade from whiteboards to interactive displays? We'll guide you through the entire process. And the best part, you can get it all from a single supplier. That helps you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. As educators, we've all seen it. That bright student who checks out of math or science because they feel it's just not for them. Play Piper is here to change that. With award-winning STEM kits and coding curriculum, students move from passive learning to active building. They see how creativity, problem solving, and innovation all come together, and they love it. If you're looking to bring more engagement into your classroom, discover how Piper supports teachers and empowers students at playpiper.com. Teachers love the support that IXL provides in the classroom, and ruckus makers love it all as well because IXL also gives school leaders meaningful insights on every level. Put your finger on the pulse of student performance with IXL and its dashboard to drill down to see progress and growth for individual students. You can even customize reports to hone in on the information that matters most to you. IXL helps ruckus makers make data-informed decisions that will benefit their students' growth goals. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, and we're back with Dr. Karida Brown, who wrote an excellent book recommended for all ruckus makers called Battle for the Black Mind, and we're here discussing that today. Previous to the break, I teased out the idea of schools and campuses send these invisible messages, and I want you to there's probably a lot of listeners that get it, and then there's a portion that don't get it and are open to it, and then there's a group too that are probably like, oh, that's a bunch of bogus stuff, and I don't necessarily want to talk to that group right now. So the group that's lacks some awareness about the invisible messages we send, but they're open that it exists. Let's talk to them for a minute. And
Mhm.
how would you have them reflect and actually think about the school experience as it relates to, these invisible messages?
Okay, so I'll respond to this based on what I've seen over the years on college campuses. There is, in fact, something called the hidden curricula. It's metaphorical, but it's very, very real and creates, kind of like two different worlds for college students based
Yeah.
on how they're trained in their K through 12 experience to understand how to navigate, especially elite institutions, right?
Right.
So by the time, student A and student B gets to my campus, student A, who might have gone to the right private schools, who might have had a boarding school experience, whose parents had those resources to be able to get them some supplemental, you know, test taking programs and education, but also got them some cultural capital by being in the right
Mm,
clubs and spaces, right?
mhm,
That student is going to arrive to my elite campus understanding how to set up office hours with their professors and advocate for their needs. They're going to know that they are entitled to ask for more time or to accommodate, you know, uh, their ex- accommodate my expectations for their exams or whatever the assignments are. These are things that, come as second nature that are cultivated into a body of cultural capital for students who come from resourced environments. Also, the way that they know how to navigate dealing with authority.
mhm,
The kids who come from these well-resourced backgrounds don't look at me necessarily as an authority figure. They have respect for professors, but they understand that we have a relationship with one another. That student B, who's coming from an environment that isn't as well resourced, that doesn't have the same kind of networks, that perhaps comes from a situation that doesn't carry that same load of cultural capital, arrives on the same college campus, deserving it, getting the same grades, having access to the same opportunities, but they don't know that they can reach out to their professors and express their needs. They are working while they're on campus. There are structural barriers that create a different experience for different kids, and the university setting is not set up to attend to these inequalities. So what you have are a situation where students feel like they're haves and have-nots on the campus, even though they're
mhm.
all gonna get the same degree. They all ostensibly have the same opportunities, but they don't bear out that way. So I look at it as incumbent on the institution, the universities, the schools, the faculty, teachers to be mindful of these hidden curricular, these structural barriers. We need to be addressing them and coming up with ways to level the playing field so that kids can get what they need.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and conceptually, like, I get everything that you said, and so if there's a ruckus maker listening who's, like, open to this idea, but they're not sure what their campus is doing to promote, like, that hidden curricula, like, what might be a first step for them?
So in my classes, we do a lot of sharing out
Mhm,
because
mhm,
one pedagogical approach that I've really leaned into in my classroom is students learn really well and develop empathy by hearing the experiences and stories of other students as they're relating it to the material that we're going through. And I'm
mhm,
able to do that because I'm a sociologist, so our classes are very heavily theoretical and there's opportunity for discussion like that. But when discussing inequality in any way in the classroom, and I say, okay, well, let's have a discussion about this. Neighbor, how does this
mhm.
play out in everyday
In your
life?
life?
Yes, in your everyday life, whether here on this campus or in the school context that you grew up in.
Mhm,
And my students will start to raise their hand and share and say, well, I never had to think about what happens over holiday breaks when campus closes
mhm,
and
mm,
the student cafeteria closes and all students have to leave their dorms because I just go back to my parents' house
mm,
or my family's going on vacation to Maui. So, and then they hear another student who's their friend in class saying, that's the most stressful time of the year because for me, I can't go home over break and I've got to
right,
figure something out. That's a moment of precarity in my life that I've got to come up with something, and figure something out. And I can't eat and I've got to figure out how to pay for myself during that time. Those types of creating safe space for students to share out, it elevates empathy. It creates opportunity for students themselves could start asking those more critical questions about not just what we're learning in the text, but how that then bears out in the real world. So we're teaching
Yeah.
live in a real world, aren't we? Right?
Yeah.
So like placing whatever you're learning. So whether you, even if you are a, a STEM teacher, okay, finding ways to make the material relatable to the real world and in a context. The world doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it's a great exercise for us all to be in the mode of bouncing those ideas off of how would this play out differently in different contexts, and how do we then how will we account for that? What could we
And
be thinking about differently? Then you kind of transform your classroom into a space where, from a place where the teacher is delivering a message to the students,
yeah.
you've now transformed it into a intellectual community where we're all learning together from one another, where the teacher is really facilitating that learning journey, but students are taking a part in building that out. And I think that's really, really important.
You frame that in the context of student, discourse. I'm thinking principal with staff, you might learn some real stuff, right? That's going
Mhm.
on with the adults on your campus that given like whoever's experience, yeah, it would obviously just add a lot of value if you knew it, increase your empathy and whatever. But it looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I'm just agreeing with what you're reflecting back to me,
Yeah.
Danny. The empathy piece, I'm gonna keep going back to that because I think that in a way, we've seen schooling and the educational enterprise in the country move towards this model of privatization.
Right.
And with that comes a corporatization of the school system. Whether and this goes for public schools too, even with that teach for the test hunting model, it strips the aims of education down to its very bare, tenets.
Hmm.
And what it does is it strips away that compassion piece. It strips away that character development piece. It strips away that empathy piece. The ephemeral dimensions of what the school is supposed to deliver, in addition to the delivering the curricula. Um, so I think that therein lies the tension, right?
Yeah.
Schools are not businesses. They're not
Right.
corporations. And I don't
Hmm.
care if a
Hmm.
corporation runs the school. That should not it's don't run your school on a profit model
Yeah.
only.
Right. So you have I can't wait to hear how you talk about this. It's a provocative idea. I think ruckus makers would tend to agree, but there's a sense out there at times that school and education should be sort of like neutral, right?
Yeah.
And society doesn't seem very neutral these days. And I believe you said that this is the something we need to unlearn, right? Like actually, maybe we shouldn't be neutral spaces. So can you riff on that for a while?
I can. You're gonna get me in trouble here, Danny, but I mean, we live in a real world. I teach for the world. I say that I'm the people's professor. I do
Yeah.
sociology for the streets. What do I
Yeah.
mean by that? If I writing all these books, conducting all this social scientific research on and about marginalized communities. If I'm producing that scholarship just for other professors to read the work and use academic jargon to argue with each other over it, what is it for? What is it worth? And we can translate that into every facet of what we do as teachers. So when you're showing up into the classroom and teaching, we could only teach in a neutral space if we lived in a neutral world, but we don't. The world is a political space. The world is unequal. The world is nuanced. It's not black and white. The world is heterogeneous. It is diverse. And if that's the reality in the world that we all not only have to live in, but we have to make and remake on a daily basis. Human being is a verb, okay? We're doing it every day.
That's
And
right.
if you can hold those things to be true, how are we teaching kids to turn that off when they're learning? And If we do that, then how are we training our kids to apply what they've learned to this messy, dynamic, heterogeneous, diverse, at times chaotic, oftentimes wonderful, surprising, full of possibilities world that we live in?
That's right. So, Ruckus Maker, check out Dr. Brown's Battle for the Black Mind. I have one more question, not book related, it's life related, and then we'll get to the last three that I ask all my guests. But I like to say, right, if education wants beef, then I'll bring the ruckus.
That's
What's
awesome.
it like, Karida, to hang out with Wu-Tang Clan? Because I was working out to Wu-Tang yesterday, and during my research, I came across a post where you were hanging out with them, I think overseas.
Yeah.
You got to tell us a
Oh,
bit
yeah.
about that.
So that great on you for finding that. First of all, I'm a huge Wu-Tang Clan fan. Okay. So, and this was, I think, the height of my career as a researcher, as a
Yeah.
scholar, because
Okay.
I'm a Fulbright scholar. I was in Australia doing some
Yeah.
research, Sydney,
Yeah.
right? In the archives every day. But as you know, Australia is like almost a 24-hour time zone difference. So
Right.
for
Right.
the first 2 weeks, I could not sleep like at night.
Mhm.
So I was
Mhm.
up all night, every night, always looking for who stays open the latest in Sydney, right? So one night, I'm at some bar, the bar is closing, and I say to the bartender, look, where else can I go that's still open that can serve me
Yeah.
some food? He said, there's only
Yeah.
one place left open in the whole city called Big Papa's.
Big
Now
Papas.
here I am, a Black girl from Long Island, New York, in Sydney, and this guy's telling me there's a place called Big. I'm like, surely you don't mean Big Papa's like big. He's like, yes. So I go to Big Papa's. There's a velvet rope with a line around the corner.
Yeah.
It's like 2 a.m. And I have on like pajamas, basically. Like it's just some
Yeah.
ridiculous outfit. And I say, I'm just going to try. I go up to the front of the line to the bouncer. And before I could like make up what my line was going to be, he says,
Yeah.
you here with the Wu-Tang Clan?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Yes, I am. And he opens the rope and
Oh man.
walks me downstairs to their VIP section. And I walk in, and I promise you, the RZA says, yo, shorty, what you doing here? Because I'm like, we're like the only Black people. And I partied with them all
Uh,
night. It was so much fun. You
that's
got the
cool.
RZA, Raekwon, Old Dirty Bastard's son was there. It was amazing.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you for
Yeah,
telling that story.
this is a plug
Yeah.
to do your research. Good things will happen.
Absolutely. Awesome. So if you could put one message on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would Karida's message be?
Walk these halls like somebody fought like hell for you to be here.
And if you were building your dream school, you didn't have any limitations in terms of resources. Your only constraint was your ability to imagine. What would be the three guiding principles of Karida's dream school?
I'm going to take a script from what I learned from my parents' generation of teachers, and that would be head, hand, and heart.
Hmm.
I would build that school with principles grounded in offering the most rigorous curricula to train and nourish the next generation of brilliant minds, but hand, also training them to be able to survive in this world. And that's knowing how to do stuff. We live in an environment. So I want to train students to also understand how to be with that environment and how to build and do things with their hands. Third principle is heart. We are not just creating outputs and test scores and measures. We're creating whole human beings who have big hearts that need to be filled with empathy, love, character, and compassion. And I think that my school would have to embrace all three of those elements to be able to say that we showed up and showed out to do something in this world.
So everything we discussed today, we covered a lot of ground. What's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
No matter what you make, you're making a difference. So there's this Jamaican saying, small axe fall big tree. And that's what we're doing every day as educators. That saying means that It's rarely the big thing that makes change, that makes a difference. It's the 1,001 little things that we do on a daily basis. And I want to just remind everybody, all my ruckus makers, we're the small axe. We fall the big tree. It's the power to the people, not power to the people in power. Keep that in mind. Bring that into the classroom. Make that ruckus. Small axe, fall big tree.
Hey, Ruckus Maker, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I enjoyed recording it. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something for you, where you want to do school different or you have a new idea about education, then I want to invite you to subscribe to ruckusmakers.news. That's our newsletter. And you get 3 new opportunities to do school different every week sent to your inbox. It's trusted by over 5,000 school leaders. And if you want to reimagine education within a traditional setting so that you could create a campus experience worth showing up for, subscribe for free at ruckusmakers.news.